Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Halton. I'm 29 years old and a software developer. My journey is deeply shaped by two remarkable individuals who have played pivotal roles in my life. My incredible grandmother, Brianna, and Tony Bennett, my ex-fiancé. Let me take you through my story. When I was just 13 years old, I faced a life-altering tragedy. My parents were taken from me in a car accident, and my world turned upside down. But amidst the darkness, my grandmother Brianna stepped in to raise me. She's a woman of grace, strength, and endless love, and her sprawling mansion became my sanctuary. Growing up under her wing, I was inspired to dream big, work hard, and never lose faith in life's possibilities. Fast forward to the present day, I've built a successful career as a software developer. Securing coding contracts and navigating the ever-evolving tech world has been both challenging and rewarding. Grandma Brianna has always been my biggest cheerleader. One evening, as she adjusted family photos on the fireplace mantel, she turned to me with a warm smile and said, "These contracts you're landing are impressive, sweetie, but what makes me happiest is seeing you find someone worthy of your heart." At the time, I had a sparkling engagement ring on my finger, a symbol of my future with Tony Bennett. I smiled at her and replied, "Tony is different, Grandma. He understands me, even my tech talk. His real estate business is booming, and he's been nothing but supportive." But not everyone shared my enthusiasm. Over coffee, my best friend Claire gave me one of her trademark skeptical looks. "I don't know, Leah. Something about Tony feels off. He talks about all these big deals, but where's the proof? He's always vague." I laughed it off. "Not everyone needs to post their wins on LinkedIn, Claire. He's just private about his business." Then there was Paige, Tony's sister, who seemed to suddenly attach herself to me like a new best friend. "Leah, darling," she'd coo, "have you chosen the wedding venue yet? Tony is beyond thrilled about this wedding. Oh, and speaking of, you might want to consider a prenuptial agreement, with Brianna's fortune and all." Her suggestion struck a nerve. "That's none of your business, Paige," I snapped, trying to keep my composure. Grandma Brianna, ever the visionary, surprised me one evening with an unexpected announcement. "Leah dear, I want you to have early access to part of your inheritance. Let's make this wedding everything you've ever dreamed of." When I shared the news with Tony, his eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. Meanwhile, his best friend Olivier became a regular presence during the wedding planning. Always cheerful, he'd say, "Tony can't stop talking about you, Leah." I've never seen him so invested in someone. Yet, amid the celebratory atmosphere, there were undercurrents of unease. Paige's husband, Luke, was a quiet observer. He didn't hover or meddle, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. Once, as Tony and Paige whispered conspiratorially in a corner, Luke muttered to me, "You're good for this family," with a look I couldn't quite decipher. Through it all, doubts began to creep in. Was Claire right? Were Paige's prying and Tony's sudden excitement over the inheritance signs of something deeper? And what about Luke's cryptic remark? What seemed like the beginning of a perfect new chapter in my life quickly turned into a whirlwind of unanswered questions, secrets, and revelations that would challenge everything I thought I knew. Looking back, those moments were only the beginning of a journey I never saw coming. Wedding planning consumed 7 months of my life. Tony convinced me to open a joint account for the expenses, calling it practice for our future. I was so in love that I agreed without hesitation. When I saw the guest list, I couldn't help but ask, "For 100 guests?" "Brianna's connections will be great for my business," he replied with a grin. I frowned. "This isn't about business, Tony. It's about us." "Of course, babe," he said, kissing my forehead. But his eyes flicked briefly to the inheritance papers on my desk. Grandma Brianna, ever the supportive force, was thrilled to help with every detail. "You'll be the most beautiful bride, sweetheart. I can finally rest easy knowing you'll be taken care of." I just smiled, hanging my wedding dress and preparing for the biggest day of my life. If only I'd known what was coming. On the day of the wedding, I stood in the bridal suite, my hands shaking as I checked my phone for the 100th time. 400 guests waited, but Tony wasn't answering. He's probably just stuck in traffic, Claire said, though I could hear the tremble in her voice. Minutes turned to hours, and the whispers outside grew louder. Then Olivier burst into the room, his face pale. Leah, I'm so sorry. Tony, he's gone. The words hit me like a punch. What do you mean, gone? I whispered, my voice barely audible. He left with Jamie, Olivier said, his voice heavy with regret. Paige's friend from the yoga studio. They took a flight to New York this morning. Paige knew. She's been helping them plan it. The room started spinning. The world around me blurred as I struggled to process his words. I barely registered the pitying looks from the departing guests or Claire's arms around me as I broke down. Then, a scream echoed from the reception hall. Call an ambulance, someone shouted. Grandma Brianna had collapsed. The hospital waiting room was a haze of fluorescent lights and beeping machines. Time seemed to crawl as I sat there, numb and trembling. Finally, a doctor approached me, his face grave. Miss Halton, your grandmother suffered a major heart attack. The stress triggered an underlying condition. His words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. My world had shattered in a single day, and the pieces seemed impossible to pick up. I sat by Grandma Brianna's hospital bed, clutching her frail hand. My voice trembled as I whispered, the joint account, it's empty. Tony took everything. Everything we saved for the wedding. Grandma Brianna's voice was faint but fierce. Get my lawyer. Now. The lawyer arrived, and Brianna's hands shook as she signed the papers. I'm changing everything, making it ironclad. He won't get a penny, she said with determination. Later that evening, Luke, Paige's husband, visited me. His face was etched with regret as he delivered the final blow. Leah, Tony's real estate empire is all fake. He's never closed a single deal. The office he showed you? Rented for appearances. The cars? Leased under fake names. My voice barely rose above a whisper. How long have you known? Too long, he admitted. Paige's been covering for him, helping him scam people. I've been gathering evidence for weeks. I watched as Grandma Brianna faded, her last words haunting me. Don't let them win, sweetheart. Show them what a Halton is made of. The day she passed, a package arrived, a final gift from her. Inside, I found proof of everything. Tony's debts, fake business documents, and emails between him and Paige planning the entire scheme. There was also the deed to the mansion and documents for my inheritance, $10 million and 4 properties. Luke had uncovered it all in Paige's office. It's time everyone knew the truth, he said quietly. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by wedding gifts I'd have to return. As I read through the lawyer's documents, I realized how far Grandma Brianna had gone to protect me, even after her death. Claire visited, watching me comb through the evidence. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked at the mountain of lies Luke had uncovered, feeling my resolve sharpen. I'm going to make sure they never do this to anyone else. A year later, my life was completely different. My tech startup had taken off, and I gained not just financial success, but a renewed sense of self-worth. Tony showed up at my office one day, uninvited, looking disheveled. Leah, I made a mistake, he stammered. Jamie, she wasn't you. She left me after spending all your money. I rose from my desk, smoothing my designer suit. There it is, I said calmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Tony's face fell as security escorted him out. I watched him go, feeling no regret. I was finally free of his lies, ready to embrace the future Brianna had fought to secure for me. Her legacy lived on, and I was determined to honor it every day. I motioned toward security, but Tony wasn't finished. Meanwhile, Paige had started hovering nearby, trying to insert herself into the situation like a concerned friend. Leah, sweetie, Paige cooed. Tony's changed, and let's be honest, that inheritance should really be shared. You two were practically married, after all. Her words dripped with manipulation, but I didn't have time to respond before the lawsuit hit. Tony filed a claim, insisting we were in a common-law partnership. He argued that we had shared finances and lived together as a couple, demanding a portion of the inheritance. Then came the rumors. My phone buzzed early one morning. Claire, my assistant, burst into my office, visibly upset. Mrs. Lauren called, she said, her voice tinged with urgency. Paige has been telling everyone at the country club that you manipulated Brianna into changing her will on her deathbed. The accusations were absurd, but the damage to my reputation had begun. Later that day, Olivier appeared at my door, guilt written all over his face. Leah, I can't stay quiet anymore, he said, looking tortured. I overheard Tony and Paige talking the night before your wedding. It was all a setup. You weren't the first. There were 4 other engagements in different states, all broken off after Tony drained the finances of wealthy families. His words hit me like a truck. My chest tightened and my thoughts raced. Tony had played me. Before I could process it all, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Luke, an old family friend and a lawyer. Leah, meet me at the diner on 6th. Bring your phone, he said curtly before hanging up. At the diner, Luke slid a small USB drive across the table. His expression was somber but resolute. I planted a recorder in Paige's study, he explained. With trembling hands, I plugged in my earbuds. A crackling sound gave way to Tony's voice. Once we file the lawsuit, she'll settle, he said, his tone smug. No one wants their family's dirty laundry aired in court. Then Paige's voice chimed in, cold and calculating. The rumors about Brianna are working. People are already questioning Leah's character. Tony laughed. With my charm and your connections, the judge will believe we were practically married. Those fake documents you made about us living together? Perfect forgeries. Leah won't know what hit her. My hands clenched into fists, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the table. I stared at Luke, stunned. Why are you helping me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because Paige and Tony have destroyed too many families, he said firmly. I'm tired of watching them hurt people. They're meeting again tomorrow. I'll have everything we need by then. I looked down at the USB drive in my hands, Brianna's last words echoing in my mind. Leah, don't let them win. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Let's end this, I said, determination surging through me. I decided it was time to settle things once and for all, in court. As the trial began, my lawyer stood confidently before the judge. Your Honor, he announced, before we proceed with Mr. Bennett's lawsuit, I'd like to submit new evidence. From his briefcase, he pulled out a USB drive containing the recordings Luke had given me. Tony's face turned ashen, and his lawyer stammered, what evidence? Moments later, the courtroom was filled with the damning audio. Tony and Paige's voices echoed through the room, detailing their scheme in their own words. Gasps filled the gallery as the truth unraveled. But this was only the start. A few days after the trial, a stern-faced FBI agent walked into my office. Miss Halton, he said, handing me a badge. We need to talk. We've been tracking a pattern of marriage fraud across state lines, and it seems Mr. Bennett is at the center of it. Hours later, I found myself in a federal building. Photos of Tony's previous targets were spread out on a table for women, for broken engagements, all from wealthy families. Every time, it's the same playbook, Tommy Shelby explained. He gains their trust, drains their finances, and disappears. And Paige? She's not just an accomplice. She's been laundering money through fake property deals for years. Soon after, Paige's real estate office was raided. As agents combed through the evidence, the scope of her crimes became clear. 17 years, Claire whispered when the sentencing day arrived. Tony was handed a hefty federal prison sentence, his smug demeanor replaced by utter defeat. Paige sobbed openly in court as her real estate license was officially revoked. Please, she cried, I have mortgage payments. I couldn't help but smile. I reached into my bag and waved the foreclosure papers for her so-called dream house. I bought it at auction, I said, my voice steady. When news of the scandal broke, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors who had once ignored me were now eager to talk. Miss Halton, a venture capitalist's voice buzzed over the speakerphone, we're very impressed with your startup's potential. Would you be interested in discussing a Series A investment? Meanwhile, Luke filed for divorce from Paige, turning state's evidence to help ensure her conviction. Olivier stepped forward too, working with the authorities to identify other victims. Together, we founded a support group for those Tony and Paige had wronged. Each week, the group grew larger, filled with people who finally felt heard. One day, Claire tossed a letter onto my desk. Tony's handwriting was scrawled across the envelope, the prison stamp clear. "Are you going to read it?" she asked. I shook my head and fed it straight into the shredder. Some chapters deserve to stay closed. With a satisfied sigh, I opened my laptop, logged into my account, and clicked Send Donation. Another $200,000 was transferred to the Fraud Victims Support Fund we had established. As I leaned back, gazing out the window, I couldn't help but admire the view. It was spectacular, the best from Paige's former dream house. Justice had been served and life, at last, was moving forward. I turned the house into a shelter, a haven for women escaping financial abuse. It felt like the perfect way to honor Grandma Brianna's legacy. She had always believed in helping others and would have been proud of New Beginnings, as we named it. "To New Beginnings," I said, raising my glass with Claire, Luke, and Olivier on the shelter's opening day. The sun streamed through the windows, filling the room with warmth and hope. Somewhere in a federal prison, Tony was beginning the first of his 17-year sentence. Paige, on the other hand, was crammed into a tiny studio apartment, drowning in legal fees and far from her life of luxury. As for me, I was just getting started. My company's IPO was scheduled for the following week, a milestone I never could have imagined reaching during those dark days. Life had turned around and I was finally in control. But I often wondered, what would you do if you discovered your ex had kept evidence of their past scams? Would you turn them in immediately? Use it as leverage? Or wait and plan your next move like I did? The hardest part wasn't the betrayal on my wedding day. It was the realization that my grandmother had seen through Tony's lies long before I did. She had changed her will to protect me. One last, selfless act of love. It was bittersweet, but it reminded me of something important. Sometimes, love means making tough choices to protect the people we care about. That's what Brianna did for me. And it's what I now strive to do for others. So tell me, have you ever had to deal with a manipulative ex? How did you reclaim your power and move forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. Because here's the thing, success is the best revenge, but justice? Justice is pretty sweet too. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of survival, revenge, and karma finally catching up to those who deserve it. New stories drop every week, showcasing incredible journeys of overcoming toxic relationships and coming out stronger on the other side. Together, we're building a community of resilience, strength, and hope. And always remember, when you're faced with betrayal, the best thing you can do is rise above it, rebuild, and show the world that you're unstoppable.